The first thing people noticed about Caleb Rowan wasn't his age. It was the way he stood. 18 years old, tall but underweight, shoulders slightly hunched like someone used to bracing for impact. Not from fists, though he'd known those too, but from disappointment, from doors closing, from adults shaking their heads before he even finished a sentence. Beside him stood his younger brother, Micah Rowan, 13 and quiet in a way that made grown-ups uneasy. Not shy, not rude, just guarded. His eyes tracked everything. His hands stayed close to his body, like he was afraid the world might snatch them away if he wasn't careful. Two boys, one rusted pickup, and a deed to a piece of land nobody wanted. That was how they arrived. The town didn't have a sign that said welcome, but it didn't need one. Towns like this had other ways of speaking: long looks, short answers, silence stretched just a second too long, the kind that told you everything without saying a word. Caleb parked the truck on the gravel shoulder near the old general store. The engine ticked as it cooled, sounding tired, like it had already done more than anyone expected of it. Micah didn't get out right away. "You okay?" Caleb asked, keeping his voice light. "Careful, always careful." Micah nodded, but his fingers tightened around the strap of his worn backpack. Across the street, two men leaned against a pickup, coffee cups steaming in the cold morning air. They didn't bother lowering their voices. "Those the kids?" one asked. "Looks like it." "Just them?" "Looks that way." A pause, then a low chuckle. Caleb heard it. He always did. He opened the truck door and stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. The air smelled like pine and frost and something old, like this place had already decided what it was and didn't care if you fit into it or not. Inside the store, the clerk glanced up, then down at Micah, then back at Caleb. "You boys lost?" she asked. "No, ma'am," Caleb said politely. "We're here to pick up the land keys. Lot off Ridgeback Trail." "That did it." Her eyebrows lifted. "Not high, just enough." "That land," she said slowly. "Yes, ma'am." She slid the keys across the counter like they were heavier than they looked. "Winter's early up there," she added. "Gets real cold." Caleb nodded. "We know." She hesitated. "You got folks in town?" Caleb smiled, the kind of smile people learned not to trust. Too calm, too practiced. "No, ma'am, just us." Micah shifted beside him. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose sign over the door. By noon, they were driving uphill, the road narrowing into something closer to a suggestion than a promise. Pines closed in. Cell signal disappeared. Snow lingered in the shadows even though it was only October. When they finally reached the land, Micah let out a quiet breath. It wasn't much. A clearing barely wide enough to turn the truck around. Uneven ground. Stones everywhere. The mountain rose behind it like a warning. The valley dropped away in front like a dare. "This is it?" Micah asked. Caleb nodded. "This is it." Micah swallowed. "It's big." Caleb smiled. "It is." They unloaded in silence. A tent, a small wood stove, tools scavenged from pawn shops and garage sales, books, a lot of books. Micah set his backpack down and looked around. "Do you think?" he started, then stopped. Caleb waited. "Do you think they're right?" Micah finally asked. "The people back there?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He drove a stake into the ground with steady, deliberate swings. 1, 2, 3. Then he set the hammer down. "I think," he said slowly, "that people are really good at guessing what you can't do." Micah looked up at him. "And really bad at knowing what you will." That night, the temperature dropped faster than expected. The tent snapped in the wind. The stove smoked until Caleb figured out the angle of the pipe. Micah curled into his sleeping bag, eyes wide, listening to the mountain breathe. "You ever scared?" Micah asked softly. Caleb stared into the small fire. Thought about group homes, about bags packed in a hurry, about promises that sounded solid until they weren't. "All the time," he said honestly. Micah turned toward him. "Then why are we here?" Caleb met his brother's eyes. "Because this time," and he said, "no one can make us leave." The next morning, they started with the stones. There were hundreds of them, river-worn, heavy, cold. Caleb tested one, then another, stacking them by size and shape. Micah watched closely, then began sorting too. Not lifting, just organizing, finding patterns, quietly useful in ways no one ever noticed until they were gone. A truck drove past on the ridge road. Slowed, didn't stop. By afternoon, two men stood watching from a distance. "You really think you can build something out of that?" one called out. Caleb didn't look up. "I do." Micah's hands trembled, but he kept working. The men laughed, not unkindly, just certain. Winter'll teach you better, one said. Maybe it would. But as the sun dipped low and the first line of stone settled into the earth, Micah felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Not hope exactly, something sturdier, something that said, we're still here. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. By the third week, the mountain had started to learn their names. Not in words, mountains don't bother with that, but in patterns. In the sound of footsteps that returned every morning, in the way smoke rose at dawn, thin but stubborn, in the small, defiant order being carved out of a place that preferred chaos. Caleb woke before the sun now. He'd slip out of the tent quietly, careful not to wake Micah, and start the fire while the frost still clung to everything like a second skin. His breath came out in white bursts. His hands burned, then numbed, then burned again. He welcomed it. Pain was honest. Pain made sense. Stones were everywhere. Rivers smoothed, heavy, unforgiving. Caleb learned them the way some people learned engines or horses, by touch. Which ones locked together? Which ones lied? Which ones looked solid but cracked under pressure? Micah joined him once the light crept over the ridge. He didn't lift much. Not yet. Instead, he sorted. Smaller stones to one side, flatter ones stacked neatly. The best pieces marked with a scratch in the dirt, like they were being saved for something important. You're getting picky, Caleb said one morning. Micah shrugged. They matter. Caleb smiled. They do. By late October, the foundation line was visible, a rough rectangle scratched into the earth, stubborn and real. It didn't look like much to anyone passing by, but to Micah it looked like proof. The town noticed too. Pickups slowed on the ridge road. A man from the gas station stopped once, hands on his hips, squinting like he was trying to solve a puzzle that offended him. You boys planning to camp all winter? He asked. Caleb wiped sweat from his brow. Planning to live. The man laughed. Up here? Yes, sir. He shook his head, not unkindly. Cold don't care about plans. No, Caleb agreed. It doesn't. Micah stood a little straighter after that. Nights were harder. The wind found every weakness in the tent. The stove smoked when the air pressure dropped. Micah's sleep came in short stretches, broken by dreams he didn't talk about. Sometimes Caleb woke to the sound of his brother breathing too fast, fists clenched like he was bracing for something invisible. Caleb never asked questions. He just stayed awake. One night, when the cold pushed through everything and the mountain groaned like it was alive, Micah finally spoke. What if it's not enough? He whispered. Caleb stared into the fire, thought about the books, the diagrams, the careful planning that still felt too fragile. Then we make it enough, he said. Micah's voice shook. What if we can't? Caleb turned to him fully. Then we don't quit anyway. That was the rule. By November, the walls were coming up. Slowly, painfully, one stone at a time, Caleb mixed mortar in a battered tub, keeping it from freezing with a fire built dangerously close. His arms ached constantly. His back felt older than it should. Some nights he lay awake cataloging every mistake he'd made, every angle that could fail. Micah watched everything. He noticed when Caleb favored his left arm, when his hands bled through the tape, when he pushed too hard. You should stop, Micah said one afternoon. Caleb didn't look at him. After this course, you said that 2 courses ago. Caleb sighed, then laughed softly. You sound like a nurse. Micah didn't smile. You sound tired. That night, Micah surprised him. While Caleb slept, Micah rewrote the day's measurements in a notebook. Cleaner, clearer. He marked the weak spots. He sketched a better chimney angle based on a diagram he'd studied twice already. In the morning, he handed the notebook over without a word. Caleb stared at it. You did this? He asked. Micah nodded, suddenly unsure. Caleb swallowed hard. This is really good. Micah's shoulders relaxed just a little. Visitors came more often now. Not to help. Pride wouldn't allow that. But to watch. To measure the boys against the mountain and quietly revise their bets. Roof won't matter, someone said once. Heat's the real killer. Micah overheard that one. That night, he couldn't stop shivering, even with the fire going. Caleb noticed. He added a second layer to the walls. Changed the stone pattern. Made it thicker than planned. It cost them time, but it bought Micah warmth. Snow came early. The first real storm hit before Thanksgiving, bearing their progress in white silence. Caleb worked anyway, clearing stones, relighting fires, fighting the creeping fear that maybe the town was right. Micah slipped on the ice that morning. He went down hard. Caleb was at his side in seconds, heart hammering. I'm okay, Micah insisted, but his knees shook. Caleb helped him up, steady hands, steady voice. You're done for today. Micah protested. We're behind. Caleb met his eyes. We're together. That night, Micah slept by the fire, knee wrapped, head resting against the stone wall that wasn't finished yet, but already felt solid. He ran his fingers over the cold surface. It's strong, he murmured. Caleb nodded. It will be. Outside, the wind howled, impatient. Inside, two brothers sat in the half-built shell of something that refused to disappear. The mountain had thrown its first warning, and they were still standing. December didn't arrive all at once. It crept in. It came in the way the light disappeared earlier every day, slipping behind the ridge before Caleb felt ready to stop working. It came in the way the wind stopped warning and started attacking. It came in the silence, thick, watchful, the kind that made even strong thoughts feel small. The walls were almost finished. Almost. And somehow that made everything feel heavier. Caleb could feel the mountain testing them now. Not with storms, yet, but with pressure. With questions that didn't have clear answers. With exhaustion that settled into his bones and refused to leave. Micah noticed first. He always did. Caleb moved slower. He rested longer between lifts. Some mornings he sat on a stone and stared at the ground like he was counting something invisible. You okay? Micah asked one afternoon, handing him a mug of reheated coffee. Caleb took it, nodded. Just tired. Micah watched him drink. You've been tired. Caleb smiled faintly. We're close. Micah didn't smile back. The town had started coming closer now, not stopping at the ridge, not pretending not to care. They stood at the edge of the clearing, boots planted, arms crossed, watching the brothers work like they were witnessing a slow-motion accident they couldn't look away from. You're running out of time, one man called out. Caleb didn't answer. Snow's coming hard next week. Micah flinched. Caleb kept laying stone. Another voice, older, rougher. You should head down while you still can. That night, Micah barely touched his food. He sat near the fire, knees pulled to his chest, eyes fixed on the flames like he was waiting for them to say something first. What if they're right? He asked quietly. Caleb didn't turn around. We've been over this. I know, Micah said, but what if this time they are? Caleb closed his eyes. He wanted to tell Micah that doubt was just noise, that fear always showed up loudest when you were doing something that mattered, that quitting now would hurt worse than any winter ever could. But the truth pressed against his ribs. He didn't know. Not for sure. Micah, he said slowly, choosing his words the way he chose stones. Being scared doesn't mean we're wrong. Micah's voice cracked. It doesn't mean we're right either. That one landed. The next morning, snow fell hard and fast. Not a blizzard, yet, but enough to bury tools and slow everything down. Caleb worked anyway, hands stiff, breath ragged. Mortar froze faster than he could mix it. Stones slipped. One cracked clean through when it hit the ground. Caleb swore under his breath. Micah watched, helpless. You should stop, Micah said. Not now. You're shaking. Caleb ignored him. By noon, his hands wouldn't cooperate anymore. A stone slipped from his grip and slammed into the wall, sending a vibration through the half-built structure that felt too loud. Micah's heart jumped. Caleb! Caleb froze. The wall held. Barely. He stepped back, chest heaving, and for the first time since they arrived, the fear reached his face. Micah saw it. Really saw it. That night, Micah didn't sleep. He lay awake listening to the wind tear through the trees, listening to Caleb breathe on the other side of the tent, slower than usual, heavier. Images crowded his mind, walls collapsing, fire going out, waking up buried in white silence with no way out. He remembered other winters, other places, other nights when adults said it'll be fine, and then disappeared. In the early hours before dawn, Micah made a decision. The next day, while Caleb worked on reinforcing the corner joints, Micah packed his backpack. Not everything, just the essentials. Caleb noticed immediately. What are you doing? He asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Micah didn't look at him. I'm thinking. That's not thinking, that's leaving. Micah's hands trembled. I'm not leaving you. Caleb stepped closer. Then what is this? Micah finally met his eyes. I'm scared, he said. And this time, I don't think being brave fixes it. Caleb felt something tear loose in his chest. You think I'm not scared? He snapped, sharper than he meant to. You think I don't lie awake every night wondering if I've dragged you into something I can't finish? Micah swallowed. Then why are we still here? The question hung between them, heavier than the stones. Caleb exhaled slowly. Because no one else ever stayed, he said, and I promised myself I would. Micah's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. I don't want to be brave, he whispered. I just want to be safe. The wind surged, rattling the unfinished walls. Caleb looked at the structure, at the thick stone courses, at the choices he'd made to protect Micah, even when it cost them time. He knelt in front of his brother. You're safe, he said quietly. Not because of this place, because of me, and because of you. Micah's breathing slowed. Caleb reached for the backpack and set it down gently. Stay, he said, not as an order, as a plea. Micah hesitated. Then slowly he unpacked. That night the snow fell harder than before, but inside the half-built stone walls, two brothers sat shoulder to shoulder, listening to the storm test what they'd made and what they were made of. They didn't know it yet, but this was the last quiet night before everything changed. The storm Micah feared didn't come right away. Instead, the mountain went quiet. It was the kind of quiet that made even the wind seem cautious, like nature itself was holding its breath. Snow fell lightly for days, powder soft and deceptively gentle, settling into corners and smoothing over the sharp edges of everything they'd built. Caleb took advantage of it. He worked longer hours, driven by something deeper than urgency now. It wasn't about proving the town wrong anymore. It wasn't even about the winter. It was about finishing. The last course of stone went up on a gray afternoon when the sky hung low and heavy, threatening but not yet committed. Caleb set the final rock carefully, hands steady despite the ache that had become constant. He pressed it into place, adjusted the angle, then stepped back. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Micah was the first to break the silence. It's actually standing, he said, disbelief softening his voice. Caleb let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Yeah, he said. It is. The walls were thick, thicker than the books recommended, uneven in places, scarred by fingerprints, chipped edges, small imperfections that told the truth about how hard they'd been earned. To Micah, they were beautiful. They raised the roof in stages, careful and methodical. Caleb had prepared the beams weeks earlier, shaping them during breaks, checking measurements twice, sometimes 3 times. Micah read aloud from the notebook, calling out angles and spacing like he was born for it. Little left, Micah said. Caleb shifted the beam. This? Too much. Caleb smiled faintly. You're picky. Micah grinned. You taught me. By the time the roof frame was set, snow had begun falling heavier again. Not dangerous yet, but insistent, like a reminder. They worked through it. Shingles went on one by one, fingers stiff, breath visible. Caleb slipped once, boots skidding on frost-slick wood, and Micah's heart stopped until he saw his brother catch himself. Careful, Micah said, voice tight. I've got it, Caleb replied, though his hands trembled. That night, they slept inside the structure for the first time. Not the tent, not the half-open shell. Inside. The floor was still dirt. The air smelled like stone and smoke and damp wood. The stove crackled, tentative but real, and the walls held the heat in a way the tent never had. Micah lay on his back, staring at the rough ceiling beams. It's warm, he said quietly. Caleb nodded, sitting with his back against the wall, boots still on. Stone holds heat, he said. Once it warms up, it doesn't let go easy. Micah closed his eyes. He slept through the night. That alone felt like a victory. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the small window opening, pale and fragile. Snow glittered outside, untouched. Micah stood in the doorway, wrapped in his jacket, taking it all in. Do you think it's enough? He asked. Caleb joined him, looked at the walls, the roof, the chimney rising solid and straight. I think, he said slowly, it's as good as we can make it. The town came by that afternoon, not all at once. One truck, then another. Men stood near the edge of the clearing, hats pulled low, watching without commentary. The mood was different now. Less amusement, more calculation. That's a real chimney, someone muttered. Walls are thick. Micah stood close to Caleb, but he didn't hide. That night, the temperature dropped hard. 10 below, then 15. The stove worked overtime. Fire fed constantly, heat sinking into the stones. Caleb adjusted vents, watched the draw, listened for sounds that didn't belong. Micah sat wrapped in a blanket, notebook in his lap. If the fire goes out, he said softly, we relight it. Caleb smiled. Exactly. For a few days, life settled into a rhythm. Wake, feed the fire, check supplies, melt snow for water, repair small things, rest. It almost felt normal. Almost. Then the radio crackled. Caleb had fixed it weeks earlier, more out of habit than hope. Now static gave way to a voice. Thin, distorted, urgent. Cold front pushing south, significant snowfall, dangerous wind chills, advise. The signal cut out. Micah looked up. That didn't sound good. Caleb's jaw tightened. No, he said, it didn't. The sky changed that evening. Clouds rolled in thick and fast, swallowing the light before the sun could finish setting. The wind picked up, not playful anymore, but sharp and purposeful, probing the cabin like fingers testing a lock. Micah felt it first. The way the walls seemed to hum, the way the silence pressed in, heavy and expectant. Caleb, he said quietly. I know, Caleb replied. They doubled the firewood inside, secured everything that could move, checked the door seal twice. As night fell, snow began to fall sideways. Micah sat near the stove, hands wrapped around a mug, watching the flames dance. His earlier fear crept back, quiet but persistent. What if this is it? He asked. Caleb crouched in front of him. Then we face it, he said simply. Micah searched his brother's face, looking for doubt. He found none. Outside, the wind roared louder, impatient now. Inside, the stone walls stood firm, holding the heat, holding the brothers, holding back the world. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both felt it. The mountain wasn't testing them anymore. It was coming for them, and whatever happened next would decide everything. The storm didn't announce itself. It didn't knock. It slammed. Sometime after midnight, the wind changed direction, dropping out of the sky like it had been waiting for permission. It struck the cabin in full force, howling through the trees, shaking the roof hard enough to send dust drifting down from the beams. Micah jolted awake. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The darkness pressed close, thick and disorienting. Then the firelight flickered, throwing familiar shadows across the stone walls, and the memory rushed back. The cabin, the mountain, the warning. Caleb, Micah whispered. I'm up, Caleb replied immediately. He was already on his feet, boots half-laced, feeding another log into the stove. The fire flared, light surging against the walls. The stones absorbed it slowly, steadily, like they'd been built to do exactly this. Outside, the wind screamed, not a sound so much as a force. Relentless, violent, alive. Snow hurled itself against the walls, packing into every corner, every seam. The temperature plummeted so fast Micah felt it in his chest. How cold? Micah asked. Caleb checked the small thermometer nailed near the door. His jaw tightened. 20 below, he said, then after a pause, and falling. The cabin held. At first, hours blurred together. Caleb fed the fire constantly, hands blackened with soot, movements precise and economical. Micah melted snow, careful not to waste heat, pouring water into a battered pot with shaking hands. The wind found its way through tiny gaps Caleb hadn't known existed. Cold seeped in like a living thing, creeping along the floor, climbing Micah's legs. He wrapped his blanket tighter, teeth chattering. I'm okay, he said, even as his body betrayed him. Caleb noticed anyway. He shifted Micah closer to the stove, added another layer of insulation along the wall, his movements sharp with urgency. Stay awake, Caleb said. Talk to me. Micah nodded. Remember when we used to count ceiling tiles? Caleb almost laughed. Almost. Yeah, he said. You always cheated. I had to, Micah replied weakly. You were better at it. The storm worsened. By dawn, visibility outside was gone entirely. The world beyond the door had vanished, replaced by white fury and soundless motion. Snow piled against the cabin walls, heavy and suffocating, pressing in from all sides. Micah's hands shook uncontrollably now. Caleb knelt beside him, heart hammering. Hey, he said firmly, look at me. Micah tried. His eyes struggled to focus. You with me? Micah nodded, though it felt like lying. Caleb made a decision then. He dragged more firewood inside, stacking it dangerously close to the stove. He adjusted the airflow, risking smoke for heat. He pulled Micah against him, wrapping both of them in every blanket they owned. The cabin groaned. A sharp crack echoed from above. Micah flinched. The roof? It's holding, Caleb said, though he wasn't entirely sure. Another hour passed. Then another. Micah's words slowed. His responses came late. His head lolled against Caleb's shoulder. Caleb felt panic surge. Micah, he said sharply, talk to me. Micah's lips parted. No sound came out. Caleb shook him gently. Micah? Nothing. Fear hit like ice water. Caleb slapped Micah's cheek lightly, not to hurt him, just enough to break through. Micah gasped, eyes fluttering open. Don't, he murmured. Don't let me sleep. Caleb's voice broke. I won't. He stoked the fire again, ignoring the smoke burning his eyes. He paced. He spoke constantly. Stories, memories, anything to keep Micah tethered to the moment. You remember the first night here, Caleb said. You said the land was too big. Micah smiled faintly. Still is. You're going to tell that story again, Caleb said fiercely. Years from now. Outside, something changed. The wind shifted again. Deeper, more violent. A sound rose beneath it, low and terrifying. Caleb recognized it instantly. An avalanche. The mountain roared. The impact hit seconds later. Snow slammed into the cabin like a freight train, burying it in white darkness. The walls shuddered. The door buckled inward. Dust rained down. Micah screamed. Caleb threw himself over his brother instinctively, bracing, shielding. The sound lasted forever. Then silence. A suffocating absolute silence. The fire flickered, nearly dying, then caught again. Caleb lifted his head slowly. They were buried. Snow pressed against the windows. The door was sealed shut. The cabin had become a stone island entombed in white. Micah was crying now, silent tears freezing on his cheeks. We're trapped, he whispered. Caleb swallowed hard. We're alive. Micah's breathing hitched. For how long? Caleb looked around. At the firewood, the stove, the thick stone walls that still radiated warmth even now. Long enough, he said. They rationed everything. Firewood fed sparingly. Water measured carefully. Movement kept minimal to conserve heat. Hours crawled by, marked only by the fire's rise and fall. Micah dozed in short bursts, always pulled back by Caleb's voice. Stay with me, Caleb repeated. Micah nodded each time. Then sometime during the second night, they heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. A dull thud. Then another. Micah's eyes widened. Did you hear that? Caleb held his breath. It came again. A muffled shout. Caleb surged to his feet, heart racing. He grabbed the axe, hacked at the door just enough to crack it open, letting a blast of snow and wind explode inside. 3 figures collapsed into the cabin. Frozen, half-buried, desperate. Caleb dragged them in one by one, hands shaking with adrenaline. Micah stared, stunned. Please, one of them rasped. We saw your chimney. The firelight revealed faces blue with cold, eyes wide with shock. The cabin, the one they'd mocked, doubted, dismissed, had become the only refuge left on the mountain. Caleb slammed the door shut, sealing them all inside. Micah looked up at his brother, awe and fear tangled together. We did it, he whispered. Caleb didn't answer. He was already moving, already helping, already proving something he hadn't known until this moment. The mountain had tried to take them. Instead, it had given them a reason to survive. The cabin didn't feel small anymore. Not with 5 people crammed inside, breath fogging the air, boots piled near the stove, snow melting into dark puddles on the dirt floor. The fire roared hotter than it ever had, flames licking the stone, heat radiating outward like a promise. Caleb moved on instinct. Blankets first, then water, then warmth. Slow, careful warmth. The kind that didn't shock frozen bodies into something worse. He guided the strangers closer to the stove, his voice calm, steady, even as exhaustion clawed at him. Easier, he said. You're safe now. Micah watched wide-eyed. He recognized that tone. It was the same one Caleb had used on him through the worst nights of the storm. Grounded, reassuring, unbreakable. One of the newcomers was an older man, beard crusted with ice, hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold the mug Micah offered. A woman sat hunched beside him, face pale, clutching a small boy to her chest. He's not waking up, she whispered, panic cracking through her voice. Micah froze. Caleb was already there. He's breathing, Caleb said after a quick check, placing 2 fingers gently at the boy's neck. Weak, but steady. Micah swallowed hard and did what he could. More blankets, rubbing the boy's hands, speaking softly even though his own voice trembled. You're okay, he murmured. You're warm now. The words surprised him. They sounded like something he believed. The storm raged on outside, but inside the cabin, time slowed into something fragile and deliberate. They took turns feeding the fire, watching each other, staying awake. No one slept deeply. No one wanted to. The older man finally spoke, voice rough. I told them, he said quietly, staring at the stone wall. Told them you wouldn't last the winter. Caleb didn't respond. Micah did. Why? He asked, not angry, just curious. The man sighed. Because we've seen people try before and fail. Micah nodded slowly. We've failed before too. That shut him up. Morning came without sunlight. Just gray. The storm weakened sometime during the second day, its fury fading into a low, resentful moan. The snow outside lay piled impossibly high, swallowing everything in sight. The world felt distant, unreal. Caleb cracked the door open inch by inch, careful of shifting weight. White poured in. They were buried almost to the roofline. "We're not going anywhere," Micah said. Caleb shook his head. "Not yet." They waited. Another day passed. Supplies dwindled faster with extra mouths to feed. But Caleb never hesitated. Neither did Micah. They shared what they had, rationed carefully, adjusted. The boy who had almost frozen slept near Micah now, breathing steadily. On the third day, they heard it, a distant sound, faint, rhythmic. Micah's head snapped up. "Is that?" Caleb smiled for the first time in days. "Snowshoes." They broke through hours later, men from town, faces lined with relief and disbelief, following the only thing visible for miles, the chimney. Smoke. The rescue leader stared at the cabin, then at Caleb. "This is yours, Hike?" he asked. Caleb nodded. The man shook his head slowly. "We saw it from 3 miles out." Micah felt something shift inside his chest. Not pride. Belonging. The townspeople took in the scene quickly. 5 survivors alive, warm, shaken but breathing. Eyes lingered on the stone walls, the stove, the careful order inside. One man stepped forward, voice thick. "We owe you." Caleb shrugged. "We just didn't leave." The older man, the one who doubted them, caught Micah's eye. "You did good," he said quietly. Micah nodded, unsure what to do with that. When the road was finally cleared enough for vehicles, the rescued family left first. The woman hugged Micah tightly, tears freezing on his jacket. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved him." Micah didn't know what to say, so he said the truth. "We didn't do it alone." After they were gone, the cabin felt different again. Quieter, but not lonely. The town returned in small waves over the next week. Food, supplies, offers disguised as casual gestures. No one said sorry. They didn't need to. The change was obvious. Caleb fixed a broken snowshoe for a neighbor one afternoon, while Micah helped clear a path. Someone brought coffee. Someone else brought nails. Micah noticed how people looked at Caleb now. Not with doubt, but respect. He noticed something else too. They looked at him. Really looked. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the mountain glowed gold for the first time since the storm, Micah sat on the cabin step, watching the smoke rise. Caleb joined him. "You did good back there," Caleb said. Micah shrugged. "I just helped." Caleb smiled. "That's what doing good looks like." Micah was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't think we'd make it," he admitted. "I almost left." Caleb nodded. "I know." Micah glanced at him, surprised. "I was scared," Micah continued, "but I'm not anymore." Caleb rested a hand on his shoulder. "Me neither." That night, Micah slept deeply, dreamless and calm. The mountain stood silent outside, its challenge spent. And for the first time since they arrived, Micah felt something settle inside him. Solid, steady, unshakable. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were seen. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It never does in the mountains. Instead, it came in small, merciful ways. The drip of melting snow from the eaves. The return of birdsong in the early mornings. The way the air stopped biting and started breathing back. The cabin stood through it all. Stone walls darkened by winter, chimneys scarred but proud. Caleb noticed the changes first. The way people drove up the ridge road without slowing to stare. The way footsteps approached the cabin without hesitation. The way knocks came not out of curiosity but comfort. Micah noticed something else. He noticed he wasn't shrinking anymore. He walked differently now, shoulders back, eyes lifted. He spoke when people spoke to him. He laughed sometimes. Real laughter. The kind that surprised him when it came out. One afternoon, as the last of the snow retreated into the shadows, an older man from town stopped by with his grandson. The boy couldn't have been more than 10, all questions and restless energy. "You really built this?" the boy asked, wide-eyed, running his fingers along the stone. Micah knelt beside him. "Stone by stone." The boy looked up. "Weren't you scared?" Micah paused. "Yes," he said, "but we built it anyway." Caleb watched from the porch, something tight and warm in his chest. Offers came. Jobs, help, land. Someone mentioned town council. Someone else talked about running power lines up the ridge. Caleb listened politely, thanked them, declined most of it. "We didn't come here to be rescued," he said simply. We came to stay. Micah understood that now. The cabin grew slowly over the years, not bigger in the way people expected, but better. A second room, a proper floor, a porch that caught the evening sun just right. Caleb taught Micah everything he knew about stonework, about load and balance, about patience. Micah learned fast. He had a feel for it, an instinct. He could look at a pile of rocks and see a wall waiting inside. People noticed. They started bringing their own projects, retaining walls, fireplaces, small repairs. Caleb never charged much, sometimes not at all. Someone taught me once, he'd say. Micah knew that wasn't exactly true, but he knew what Caleb meant. Years passed. The cabin became a landmark, not because it was grand, but because it meant something. People pointed to it when telling stories about the storm, about survival, about the night the mountain lost. Micah grew into himself. By the time he was 18, he no longer flinched at raised voices. He slept through storms. He spoke up when something mattered. He carried himself like someone who belonged where he stood. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun dipped low, Micah asked the question that had been waiting a long time. Do you ever wish we'd left? Caleb thought about it. About warm houses, easy roads, safer choices. No, he said. Do you? Micah shook his head. This place, it didn't just keep us alive. Caleb smiled. It made us. Years later, when Micah built his own home not far from the original cabin, he used the same stones, the same methods, the same quiet care. He brought Caleb's old notebook with him, pages worn, corners soft, filled with measurements, sketches, and notes written in the margins during long winter nights. Some things don't need updating. When Caleb grew older, Micah took over most of the work, the teaching, the quiet watching. Caleb sat more often on the porch now, content to listen to the mountain breathe. One autumn evening, as the first frost crept in, Caleb looked at the cabin, the original wall still standing, still strong. We did all right, he said. Micah nodded. Yeah, we did. The mountain remained. So did the cabin. So did the story. And maybe that's the part that matters most. Because this isn't just a story about survival. It's a story about what happens when you refuse to walk away from what's hard. When you choose to build instead of run. When you decide that family isn't something you're handed, it's something you protect day after day, stone by stone. So here's the question for you. If you were standing where they stood, cold, doubted, afraid, would you stay and build, or would you walk away? And if you stayed, what would you build that lasts? If this story moved you, if it made you think or reminded you of your own struggles and strength, subscribe to the channel for more powerful, human stories about resilience, survival, and the quiet courage it takes to keep going when no one believes in you yet. Because sometimes the strongest foundations are built by the people everyone else wrote off, and those stories deserve to be told.